Before any understanding of the Quran is attained, what must first be acknowledged and taken into account is the fundamental incompatibilities of the cosmologies of the Quran and modern science, that the Quran has its own cosmological system, its own conceptions of space, time, the sun, earth, and other such concepts. The sun, moon, stars, earth, and trees, and all other objects that we're familiar with carry a significance that's much broader that can be attained through the language of modern cosmology. A concept as central as that of the sun that's frequently repeated in the Quran, and whose symbolic import we find to transcend its physical reality, cannot be approached through the definitions offered by modern science, as the latter denies that any reality exists beyond its pure materiality. Modern cosmology, it will be found, is in total conflict with the Quran's, a universe whose ultimate constituents are particles of matter, molecules, chemical and biochemical composites held together and rendered by obscure forces called gravity, heat, magnetism. These are the axioms, if you will, of modern cosmology. They fulfill the same role to it as did the Enneads in Egypt, the Pantheon in the Greco-Roman world, the Anunnaki of ancient Sumer. The difference is that in all of these, particularly the Greek, as told by its chief poets, gives an anthropomorphic account of the origins of the universe, a tragedy whose cast are Gaia, the earth, Kronos, time, Uranus, the sky, etc., or as told by its more sober philosophers, the Eleatics, the Stoics, the Peripatetics, the universe is but a compromise of the four cardinal elements of fire, water, air, and earth. The modern one, on the other hand, casts concepts such as matter, heat, helium, hydrogen, etc., meaning that there are no truths higher than those. Those are its pantheon, its lawgivers. From this a conception arose in which life is but automata, steered around by purely mechanical functions, and are an amalgam of the same elements as involved in the genesis of the universe. This is a universe whose understanding is rife with concepts of measurement, of strictly efficient causes, or as Heidegger would put it, a world thoroughly separated from life, enclosed like a gigantic workshop focused upon its own space and blind to the earth. This is not a landscape in which will make sense the poetical language of the Quran, which relies mostly on the symbolic import that underlie the concepts of nature. The diction of the Quran everywhere implies that what steers life forms aren't so much epiphenomena, that is, the number of molecules, or the chemical reactions, but rather each life form has a unique ethos that guides it, and which makes it capable of such versatility as would enable it to adapt to as many situations and stimuli as nature could offer. This cannot be explained by chemical or molecular arrangements. It's more than can be explained by today's rigid concepts of measurements, whereby the earth is but a bundle of molecules or particles, has a certain weight and mass, defined by a certain spatial configuration. The Quran's cosmological view operates differently. That being is a cosmos, a purposefully ordered whole, is the maxim that should guide our understanding of the Quran, and it's why in the Quran is found inflections of words that typically refer to objects, like the earth or trees. Earth, for instance, is used to refer to the organism on which we live, as well as to mean satisfaction or repose, acceptance, tranquility, and to it is ascribed domestic terms like carpet. On the other hand, the word tree is used to mean conflict or a falling out. In a Quranic cosmos, the earth isn't a planet, not a mass with certain dimensions, but a sort of incubus, something in which forms emerge. It's the realm of shape, sense, and movement. That the same word used to mean satisfaction should also refer to the plane on which we walk says something about the logic and intellect that gave rise to the cosmos. It's therefore not to the earth as measured that our intellectual ideals should point, but rather to the purpose to which those strictly mechanical conceptions ultimately amount. If the Quran does not, after all, agree with modern conceptions of the universe, what sort of cosmos does it then espouse? The answer is held in two concepts, emergentism and resolution. This we observe in ourselves and how the mechanisms of our biology, amazingly complex though they be, are ultimately expedient. They are there simply to give us life. They free us from the laborious monotony of having breath follow breath, giving us life, the sort of life where knowledge of such intricacies isn't necessary. For the same reason that the marvelous feats of software engineering, the highly specialized programming language involved in the making of mobile devices, are invisible to the end user, the back-end work involved in the making of many of the products that we use in our everyday life are patterned this way. The mathematical and geometrical brilliance that went into the making of an office chair are irrelevant to someone who is just going to sit on it. Why should more complex things then be less visible, hidden, and discoverable only by deconstructive methods of thought? Why can't they be as intuitive and immediately visible as the physical material that make up the chair? As Toynbee explains, this is a trick by which, in the evolution of organized life, she has succeeded in building up ever more elaborate organisms. In each successive organism, in her ascending series, she has introduced the maximum possible amount of drill, or, in other words, of automation. This is a common pattern, the program by which our very universe operates. We here see a uniform movement, from the more complex to the less complex, the simpler. Complexity, we also find, is where most of the programming takes place. The more complex something is, the more hidden and farther removed from sense impression. The more complex is subordinated to the less, and complexity is used as a lever by which to give rise and freedom to higher forms. The cosmological framework on which the Quran operates is based on this fundamental pattern. Its universe is not an amorphous space where objects are suspended, but a botanical universe where ideas are constantly translated into physical form. That is, the amazingly intricate machine called the body exists first as an idea or concept in the mind of its designer, then transmuted into physicality. This phenomenon applies everywhere. Hence the codependency of the earth and the Sama, and why we compared the Sama to the Platonic world of forms, which he considered to be the more real. It's because physical forms exist as hypostasized ideas. The Sama is the repository of all ideas, all universals, all configurations, all possibilities which may appear in physical space, i.e., the earth. This pattern explains why the earth should mean, besides its original meaning, satisfaction. It's because it refers to life forms as the products of complex processes. The chair that you eventually sit on is something that's the result of a complex intellectual construction. Satisfaction or repose is that which comes after strife. Strife and complexity are equivalent in the sense. Such complexities as are involved in the anatomical structure of bodies are parts of a holistic plan. Before they are physical processes, they're a plan framed in the mind of their designer. When the doctor discovers that the liver's function is to detox and filter the blood, he does so by establishing a conceptual link between a certain number of fundamental ideas, toxin, blood, body, etc. He must understand what each of these things stand for, and their connotation, in relation to the system called the body, where this constituency of organic processes finally gain their systematic form and expression. Their meaning is their role in that overall anatomical scheme. Remove the body, i.e. the unifying principle, and these complex series of mechanisms fall out of orbit and lose their meaning. Or rather, they return to that space where forms subsist before we find any meaning to them. It's thus this so-called construct, that in which different qualities are united, that embodies the concept of earth. Consider the definition of substance, that which has attributes. Anything that you can think of, everything that exists as the sum of a number of attributes or qualities. This phenomenon, of the thing as the union of attributes and functions, is something that we cannot do without in thought. It's what makes things what they are. This is what the concept of earth ultimately stands for. It's a metaphysical and transmutational process, and the physical earth on which we walk is that which embodies that process we call resolution. It has the same function as that which the body is said to have. In other words, just as the body is the vehicle of innumerable functions and activities, or something to which all forms of activities are assigned, so is the earth the hostess of all symbiotic relations between its countless species. A distinction here is made between activity and a vehicle that houses it. Thus, if a sound is heard, we naturally look for its source, i.e., the vehicle. This is why we have prepositions in language. They are devices by means of which we're able to pinpoint the position of the source. In connection with the term earth, is the word tree, whose use in the Quran reflects the ascendancy of the metaphysical. Outside its original sense, as this protrusion that shades and feeds us, is used in the Quran and in general Arabic to mean squabble or contention. If we ask what's tree-like about disputes, we find that they have a tendency to metastasize, to become chimerical, to degenerate into more problems. Think of an age-old dispute which lasted for a long time. The Protestant-Catholic conflict, which from a small parochial part of Europe went on to influence and shape the politics and history of the whole continent and the world, going as far as to the New World and having branches stretching all the way to conflicts to which they seem on the surface to have nothing to do with, like the world wars. The word tree here, used Quranically, symbolizes all genealogical processes, or the concept of genealogy itself. The use, in chapter 56, verse 72, of the term tree in reference to fire describes the links and chains, the minutiae of many invisible processes involved in the generation of fire, how each process recapitulates and surpasses the one before it. Recall our example of how hierarchies work, how complex processes give rise to more simpler ones, and so on. In this is revealed the metaphysical connection between trees and the earth. Now, as with the trees and the earth, we find the same with the sun. This is shown most clearly in verse 1 of the chapter by the same name. If its meaning can be captured in the word would be telos. If every life form in existence possesses a potential, a purpose, a final form of sorts, a specific object or aim which it was created to attain, then the sun symbolizes precisely that notion. All creation exists in virtue of what they could be, or, let's say, they exist so as to realize their true cosmic potential, inasmuch as the seed fermenting below ground is on course to become the full-grown palm tree. The palm tree is, to the seed or to the bud, its sun. In fact, the true objective behind every process warrants the symbolic import of the sun. The sun shines upon the earth, and in turn on all that which indwells it, calling out the multitude of species to rise and manifest that which inheres in them. The connection between these three central concepts is therefore revealed. If the sun represents something's potential, then the tree is the details that it goes through on its journey towards said potential, and the earth would here be the repose, the actuality, the attainment of that potential.